Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner podcast. Sometimes churches get forgotten, neglected, or even passed over. Bob Shanks has gone to one of those forgotten churches and brought new life to the church he leads in Savannah, Georgia. Find out who he is and what he's doing to rekindle faith in this episode of the Rob Skinner podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Lots been happening in Pam's life, my life. We moved to Boston on July 22nd of this year, and we've been asked by Kevin Miller, who leads the church, and Stuart Maines, who leads our downtown region, to plant a mission team here in the Boston City Center. The church here in Boston has been here since the late 70s, and with time, many of the members have moved out into the suburbs of the Boston metropolitan area. Stuart Maines leads the downtown region, which is a combination of college students, young professionals, and marrieds. And so Pam and I we live right on the Boston Common, which is like the Central Park of Boston. And our goal is to work with the singles and marrieds to build a thriving professional ministry in the downtown core. Will Thorne is leading the effort to reach the 50 universities of the Boston area. That's right, 50 universities, if you can believe it. 2 weeks ago, Stuart preached to an overflow crowd of 570 people, and that was 50 people beyond the fire code limit. I mean, it was packed. It was just jam-packed. People are standing up, no seats left. And so last Sunday, we had to split into two services and had a combined 600 plus people. And so that first service, I mean, it wasn't even a special service. It was just actually a holiday weekend. Many people are away for the weekend. So God is doing something really special here. And I want to ask you to pray for Pam, for me, and for the church here, and especially for this mission planting we're trying to get off the ground here in the city center. If you'd like to support the program and the work we're doing, all you need to do is simply go to the show notes, and there's a link to support the program. Bob, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Good to be here.
It's fantastic to have you. Now, we met a long time ago, and you reminded me of this in Indonesia, of all places.
Yeah.
We were there
yeah.
for a regional. What brought you there at that time? I think it was 2016 is when that was.
Yeah, so we all met in Singapore, and then we support Indonesia. So we went over and spent 2 weeks in Indonesia while we were over there. And I think quite a few of the leaders from Singapore traveled over there because there's a big group of us that spent some time together for a couple of days.
That was so much fun. We went and we saw the temple, all the monkeys climbing around. Your wife had kind of an experience there.
Yes. Yeah, she got bit by one of the monkeys, and that was definitely an experience.
You were mentioning that you had to go back and she had to have rabies shots. Is that right?
Yeah, so we actually left Indonesia 3 days later, and they said you have a 9-day window to get the rabies shot. So we decided to wait. Actually, they gave us advice not to do it in Indonesia. They said, go back to America and get it done. And so, yeah, she had to have a series of shots. I don't know, I think 20 shots. And every day for a period of, I think maybe 10 days or something, she had to go in. And so, yeah, that was, that was definitely an experience for her and the funny thing was, you should have seen the look on the doctor's face in Toledo, Ohio, when we explained to them that she got bit by a monkey, because they were like, what in the world? They never had anybody show up to the hospital who has been bit by a monkey before.
Not too many monkeys there in Toledo, Ohio.
Nope.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I can say I sympathize with her. When I was a kid, when I was like a sophomore in high school, I got bit by a dog and I had to have rabies shots, and it was painful. That was back when they had the long needles, thick needles, and they had to stick it in your stomach. And then they transitioned to a smaller needle, but it was not pleasant at all. Tell me, Bob, how did you become a Christian?
So it's kind of a long story. I'll give you the shorter version of it, because what's neat is I never grew up going to church, never went to church my life until I was in my 20s. But looking back, I could see God's hand and how he was kind of guiding me to make some decisions. And so I left home at 15 and I lived on my own from 15 to 17. Well, technically from 15 on. I finished high school, again, never went to church or anything. My dad was a drug dealer. And so the home was not a good place to be, which is one of the reasons why I left. And I kind of pretty much went down the same road where I was doing the same things that he was doing. And so I ended up getting into selling drugs, but I graduated high school on my own and started a lawn care business. And so I was kind of doing what I call the old family business and trying to get my life straight. And I eventually met my wife, who also left home at 13 years old, and she lived on the streets from 13 to 15.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so we weren't really a good, it wasn't like a relationship that was building each other up. It was very dysfunctional, coming together as dysfunction. She got pregnant at 16 and had our first child at 17. We had another kid a couple of years later. So Brooke and Courtney, our daughter's names, are both disciples. And so that's all kind of important as this all plays out, because I never went to church. And so we started having kids. So I got out of the family business and tried to really pursue doing something right in my life and the company. And one day I had a guy come up to me and just start a conversation with me. In that conversation, he went to tell me that God had put it on his heart to come talk to me. And so I thought he was, honestly, at that point, no one's ever shared with me. No one's ever talked to me about God. So I thought he was crazy. I just like, this guy's just out there. However, he offered me a job, a landscape job, making pretty good money with the Air Force base. And so I stayed in contact with him. But I couldn't get past that conversation, that initial conversation where I thought he was crazy. So I went out and bought me a little King Jimmy Bible, and I just started reading. And so, we never went to church before. And so we had no clue about where to go, what to do. So I just started reading the Bible. And then separately, shortly after that, my wife, who was my wife back then, got a Bible as well, and she started reading. So we were separately reading the Bible and kind of coming together with just trying to figure out life. And it really helped us early on put some things in place, because I was still dabbling in drugs. I was being immoral. I was living just a crazy, sinful life. And we had 2 kids. And so that kind of started our journey to really start to seek out God. And the funny thing is, I ended up kind of building a relationship with that guy who originally reached out to me. And the job he offered was legit. He gave me a 6-figure job at the Air Force base. So my business.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And so one day I go in to meet him, and I explained to him, hey, I'm starting to read the Bible. We're having a kind of a spiritual conversation. And I said, however, I've been with my girlfriend for a number of years and things still aren't going well. So I think this gives me an opportunity to start fresh and pursue my relationship with God and maybe leave her. Well, not maybe, I'd already planned to leave her. And so I told him, I said, I already got my own apartment. All I need to do is tell her I'm leaving her. I'm done. I'm going to be a weekend father kind of thing. And so in that conversation, he looked at me and said, have you ever thought about marrying her? And I thought, have you not listened to anything I just said? My plan is not to get married. The plan is to pursue a whole new life. And the crazy thing is, that was the day I planned on telling her. So I went and picked her up. I can't remember where the kids were at the time. And so I went to tell her that I got me an apartment and I was planning on leaving. And instead I said, I think we should get married. And so her response was, okay. And so we did. We went and got married like a couple months later. And so we've been together, been married ever since. And so now we're actually starting to pursue churches, starting to go to church. And we went to a number of churches, but we were really more devoted to reading the Bible than anything.
Right.
And so we really had a difficult time finding what we felt like a church that matched the Bible. And we had no clue. We had no understanding of denominations or anything. So we visited a number of churches. We ended up settling for a little bit in a mainline church, and we're still very much devoted to reading the Bible. But I still was just struggling because I didn't, as a young Christian, I really was having a hard time wrestling with what I'm reading and what I'm seeing were 2 different things. And I felt like either I was clueless, I was misunderstanding what I was reading, or Christianity isn't what I thought it would be. And so I ran into a brother there who was a part of our church a long time ago, like before it was really the ICOC, which I had no idea. And so I'm hanging out with him and talked to him. And I said, hey, I don't mean to offend you, but I've been reading the Bible for about 2 years and I'm having a hard time reconciling what I'm reading with what I'm seeing. I said, I'm really just wondering, I'm reading Luke 9, I'm reading Luke 14, deny yourself. And he goes, well, I know of a church who's doing it. And I said, you mean you know of a church? You're not there? Why, if you know of a church that's living out the Bible, why aren't you there? He said, and at this time we were in Columbus, Ohio. So he goes, it's not here in Columbus, it's in Dayton. So we started going to the Dayton church. We started driving from Columbus to Dayton. And then we went to the Cincinnati church and visited Cincinnati church. And in the meantime, we found out this is 95/96, the beginning of 96. We found out they were planting a church in Columbus, Ohio in fall of 96. So we waited. We visited some of the other churches. We were kind of waiting, still skeptical. I'll be honest with you, I was still skeptical from what I was seeing in Dayton and Cincinnati that whether it was legit, and still confused. Yeah, I was very confused. And so the church was planted. The Arnesons from Chicago planted the church in Columbus back in
Okay.
late.
Okay. A.T. Arneson. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And so they were only there 3 months. And so we came over and we're still going to, checking other churches out and still coming to the Columbus church. And then Daryl and Sharon came in and we ended up studying the Bible. So my wife and I kept bugging them to study the Bible with us because that's one thing we noticed about the church. They claimed they study the Bible with people. And so it took us a little while to convince them. I don't know why. It seemed like Daryl and I have had this conversation since then. It's like, I'm asking you to study the Bible, and initially you're avoiding my question. So finally he did. So we studied the Bible, and I was actually studying the Bible to see if what I felt like I was understanding from the Bible was correct. That was my thinking going into studying the Bible. I'm not 100% sure what my wife's thinking was going into, because by the second study, she realized she wasn't a disciple. Like, it was really early on.
Okay.
And so we went through the whole study series, and by the end of it, I got it. I was like, okay, wow, what I'm seeing does match a lot of what I believe, but I've never no one's ever taught me. No one's ever put the pieces together, so to speak. And so we were baptized in February of 97. I was baptized, and I turned around and baptized my wife right afterwards. And so that kind of just started our journey there in the planting of the Columbus church back in 97.
Okay. So just a few questions. What's your wife's name?
Tricia, Trici.
Okay. Tricia. And your two daughters' names are Courtney and
Brooke. They're both married. They've both been in the ministry for about 10 years with their husbands. Courtney has married Tom McGurk. If you know the McGurks, used to be in Boston years ago. They've been working with the church in Paris for a number of years, Tom and Courtney. And then Brody and Brooke were in the ministry in Ohio for a number of years. And prior to that, they both served the ministry together in Atlanta at North River Church under the Browns. And so the Browns did a phenomenal job really raising them up and then letting them go out to be in the ministry. So really appreciate the Browns.
So this is crazy. So both you and Tricia were basically fending for yourself through high school. You had a very similar background, but then you're living together. I guess you're living together, your boyfriend and girlfriend. And at what age were you when you got married? How old were you guys?
I'll tell you the crazy part.
Okay.
My wife, Tricia was 15 when I met her. I was 20, and I was staying in a little 500 square foot bedroom with 9 other people. And she was invited down at the grocery store to come to this party. And she had been living on the streets. She showed up to the party and never left. We've been together ever since that night she showed up. Now, we weren't together. We didn't become intimate with one another till a little bit later on, but the house was kind of a flop house. And so we all kind of just stayed there together. And eventually, in a worldly way, we were just both very worldly, spent some time together and kind of just was there. So it wasn't as if I was a knight in shining armor and sweeping her off her feet.
Right.
It was one of those things that happenstance put us together, or God maybe orchestrating all this early on.
But you came from such a rough background. God seemed to just say, okay, these are the people I'm going to choose. I mean, it must be amazing how many people you can help or you can connect with based on your experience. That's rough. That's a rough background. So,
yeah, and
so you go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's as if it was just a story. Like it's hard to believe the transformation that God has done and looking at the work that God has done. So even when we share our story, we've shared this story a lot, and obviously we've studied the Bible with a lot of people, because I think at the very least it should give people hope that God could take a few messed up people. And so it has been very encouraging how God uses that.
Inspiring, Bob. I mean, that's a crazy background. That's up there with who did I interview that had a crazy story? I think it was Doug and Angela Wenz. I mean, they've got a story that'll kind of knock your socks off too. So, okay, so you met at 20. You were 20. She was 15. How old were you when you got married? How many years later?
7 years later.
7 years later. But you're together during that time, and then you guys got married, and you already had 2 kids. So, so you're 27. I mean, for your daughters to grow up and to do so well spiritually, I go, wow, that's amazing. I mean, did they ever talk about that experience or their upbringing? Or was that just normal for them?
Yeah, they do. They, obviously we didn't become disciples till 7 years later. So our kids were like 7 and 5 at the time. So they remember the dysfunction. They remember how crazy things were at that time. We were in Indonesia hanging out with the Indonesia brothers and sisters with Brody and Brooke. And I've never really thought about, we never really had that conversation. We talked about it in passing, in a sense. Do you remember that when you was a kid and mom and dad, and the Indonesian brothers and sisters were always like, how did you raise disciple kids? And Brody and Brooke was there and let them answer the question because I didn't have an answer for them. I was like, I don't,
Yeah,
I wish I could say do A, B, and C and follow this
right.
scripture and that scripture. It works out perfect. So I let them answer the question. It was very interesting to hear the answer and encouraging because again, the things they shared weren't the things that we planned to instill in them purposely.
Right.
And so, and the fact that it has really made an impact on them to where now, they served the ministry for a long time. We have no background or ministry background for our family, and yet that's kind
That's
of been the
amazing.
pattern.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, another question I have is how long did you go on reading the King James Version Bible? I mean, I have a tough time reading the King James. It's a snoozer in my mind. That's like going and watching a Shakespeare play, you know? It gives you a feeling like you're accomplished, but at the same time it kind of leaves
Yeah.
you a little empty. How long did you read that King James Version Bible?
I would say they're Tom Caswell, who's not far from where you're at there. So I started reading the Bible, and I would say for at least 4 years. And Tom Caswell said something to me. I was already a disciple for about a year or two, because the Caswells came in and replaced the Reeds. The Reeds left, Darren Schron, and then Caswells came in. And Tom goes, "When you pray, do you pray in the King James language? King James English?" And I said, "Well, no." He goes, "Have you thought about reading a translation that's more, than how you speak?" And and I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." So I would say for at least 4 years, I read the King James. Most of my memory scriptures from early on all come from the hitherto, therefore, my brother. The funny thing is, it didn't seem difficult back then for whatever reason. But now I go back and I reference the King James a lot, and I'm like, wow, I cannot believe it didn't just confuse me more. Because now looking at it, I was
Oh
like,
my
wow,
gosh. I'm amazed. I'm impressed that you just plugged away at that for 4 straight years. That's God's hand was on you for sure. Okay, another question. Okay, so you were living with Tricia, but you had some women on the side. Is that what you
yeah,
inferred there?
yes,
Okay, but Tricia found that out or she knew about that? Did she put her foot down? How did you manage to get through all of that?
yeah. So she had an idea. She pretty much knew. Of course, in the world, I just lied and denied everything. But that was important in our becoming disciples. So um, I wanted her to know everything. So we actually sat down as we were studying the Bible, and I said, "Feel free to ask me anything that you may question about our past." Um, and so I was able to kind of, because she had a number of thoughts in her head that weren't even true, right? So whatever I did, she multiplied it by like 100 times. So she thought I was out with hundreds of women. Not that one's okay, by the way. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
It's just,
sure, of course.
and so she really didn't know for sure. She just, it was her gut, that led her to believe that I was out just living a double life. And so in the beginning of our relationship, we both became dependent of one another, and she being more dependent of me. Because like I said, when she came and stayed with us and she was 15 years old, it was just a place for her to stay. She wasn't, attracted to somebody, or she didn't come for what we had to offer. She literally just needed a roof over her head. And everybody was respectful. No one, mistreated her. And if you know my wife, she's, there's a reason why she went from place to place. Like she's a very strong woman, and how she lived that kind of lifestyle without being abused or taken care of or taken advantage of is. But if you know her, like, okay, yep, she's a fighter. You know what I mean? She's not gonna. And we had
That's
some of those.
amazing.
There was times where I came home from a crazy night and she had a mean right hook, man. I mean, she let me know. I'd come in the house and she knew I was out with somebody, and I denied. And yeah, so our relationship was about as broken as you can think.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And she's been able to forgive you, obviously. She's been able to move past it.
Yeah, that was the biggest miracle. honestly.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we all need to work on in our life regardless, but when something with that kind of trauma, the way you've been treated, and taken advantage of, it has a greater, deeper impact. I will say, it's funny, we've done a lot of marriage counseling over the years, and it took her about 7 years after we became disciples for her to really work through all of that. And I was resolved early on that I had hurt her so much, I've sinned against her so much that if, I knew she had forgiven me, but the effects, of that sin, how it affected her, did affect our marriage and would affect our marriage. And I knew that, I'm going to reap what I sow. And so, because I remember again about 7 years where I felt like she not only forgave me early on, but she had really worked through like you would have no clue right now, or even
Right.
10 years ago that she has anything, for the past. And so, but if you knew
Wow.
Tricia's life as well, her mom became a disciple, and her mom was not. There's a lot she had to forgive her mom, but I think Tricia's love and forgiveness towards her mom helped her become a disciple, and her brother and
That
her
is
sister. He's like, most of her Christian, most of her family are all disciples.
that's incredible. I wish we had time to go into that. That'll have to be a part 2, a little sequel to our talk here. Can you give me an overview of your life since, 27 or so up until now, where you've been, how you got in the ministry, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So in '97, the church was planted, and so we were basically on the mission team right away. The church was so we were on campus. I was taking our kids to campus every day. We had campus ministry, yeah, and we loved it though. We were just, we did not had family, and we instantly found family, people who cared about us and loved us, and we had the same mission mindset. And so we kind of dreamed for the ministry. We dreamed to work for Hope Worldwide. We loved the work that Hope was doing, because prior to that, we were actually, we would go out and sharing our faith before we became disciples. We were bringing homeless people in our house before we became disciples. We were reading these things and just starting to do it. And then once we found the church and seeing that the church was focused on the mission, seeking and saving the lost and serving the poor, we just instantly fell in love with it. So our dream was to work for Hope and go in the ministry. And so we had a couple opportunities. It's funny, Mike Fontenot and I were having a conversation a few years back, and I was telling him about the story, how I got hired to go in the ministry in Virginia. And then I get a call from my brother, and he says, we're letting everybody go. And you can probably guess what year that was. And so I was telling Mike about that. And then Mike goes, I'm sorry, I had to make that decision. So I didn't realize he was the one who made the decision. So I got hired and fired within like a 2-week period. And then we had
So
another
you
opportunity.
you joined the ministry in 2003, and then you were let go 2 weeks later.
Yeah, we
Let's
were
just say it
officially
hasn't been
fired.
easy, Rob. It
Yeah.
wasn't the easy road you took.
Well, I totally feel like God protected us, because we could have made that move. We could have, all that could have happened. But, and back in the day, you got hired. It wasn't like an interview process where you went down and met the
Right,
church and
right.
things. So I felt very protected during that time. But then we got a call from Hope Worldwide in Philadelphia, and they asked us if we would come and work for Hope and run their inner city program, because we'd already been doing a lot of homeless work, and we had started a outreach ministry in Columbus, and we're doing a lot of work with primarily homeless people, addicts, and things like that. So they had called us and said, would you want to come to Philadelphia and work in Philly? So we went to Philly and worked there for 3.5 years. We worked in North Philadelphia. We worked with the teen ministry of the church at the same time. So we were working with the teen ministry and then doing Hope Worldwide. And that was about 2007. So we were in Columbus probably 9 or 10 years before we finally made a decision where we're going to go, because we kind of always knew God was going to send us someplace. And so we spent 3.5 years, almost 4 years in Philly. And then things came to an end. And so we were like, okay, so what do we want to do? We need more training. We want to be trained for the ministry. We felt like we've had a lot of great people really invest into us and really help us and train us and work through the most difficult times of our first 7 to 10 years as Christians, because it was very rough as disciples, getting the help we needed. People really invested in us and loved us and helped us. And, obviously God moving in our hearts. And so we decided through a number of God moments that Virginia Beach would be the place. So I talked to Mike Fontenot. We talked to some brothers there. We're going to come to Virginia Beach. We just want to come and be trained. We're not asking for a position. We're not asking. We just want to come. So we left. And so we went to Virginia Beach. We had no jobs. We had 5 kids, because we actually fostered 3 of our nieces and nephews, by the way. So we had 2 biological kids and then 3 fostered, 3 kids. So Fontenot's did a phenomenal job, just really investing in us for the 2 years we were there. So much that he, again, over coffee, Mike asked me if I'd want to go back to Ohio and lead the church in Toledo. And I was like, no, we love it here. We love Virginia Beach. We don't care if we're not getting paid. We want to stay here. We feel like we're learning, we're growing. And so he asked me, I think it was the fourth time he asked me, and I was like, all right, well, we'll check it out. We don't want to leave Virginia Beach, but we'll check it out. And so we did. We ended up going to Toledo, visiting Toledo, fell in love with the church. It was a small church that the minister had left 10 months prior. And so we moved to Toledo. The church was probably...
What year?
So that was, I want to say 2012, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And so we went there. The church was probably, I don't know, maybe 30 people, I think. And I just started getting on campus. I didn't know, we've never led a church before. We've been in ministry doing a lot of different things. And the campus ministry just took off. I mean, we were baptizing students from UT, University of Toledo, and then Bowling Green. And then we just started bringing people in. We tried to get Toledo put on the map because no one knows of Toledo, Ohio. Who knows Toledo, Ohio? We started doing internships, and we're trying to train students, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time that we were there. So we were there for just slightly over 4 years, and we have felt like from the time we left to go to Philadelphia, to Virginia Beach, to Toledo, that God had opened up doors and made things very clear, or the reasons why. Like, we went to work with Hope Worldwide, a dream come true. We went to be trained in Virginia Beach, and we knew he was going to go help try to revive a small church in Toledo, which we did. We grew the church to about 75, if I remember correctly.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So the church grew to about 75. We had a campus ministry
from 30 people.
Yeah, from 35 people is my guess, if I remember correctly.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
In about a 4-year period, and it was a blast. It was a great time. But we felt like that we accomplished what God wanted us to do, and we thought it was time to leave, and we want to leave on a good note. We've seen a lot of people leave on not so good note, and then we actually helped raise up and bring a couple in to replace us. And so what we did is we resigned. We've done this previously, where I don't feel like it's fair to the church for us to find a job and say we're resigning because we got a new position. And so we've resigned and actually the Lamberts really helped us with this, by the way, but not knowing where we're going. So we had no idea when we resigned from Toledo where we're going to go. And, we started getting some phone calls from different places, so that we started considering some things. And again, another long story short, the Lamberts contacted us and said, Columbus, Ohio is going through some difficult times. Would you be willing to help from a distance while you're still in Toledo, work with Columbus? And I said, yeah, we love Columbus. We'll be happy to go and help on weekends and stuff. I said, we're coming out of the ministry, or at least Toledo. We're not sure. We might even go overseas because we're getting some calls from overseas. I said, so I don't know. I said, we can help temporarily. And so we did. We started traveling to Columbus. We met with almost every member of the church, trying to figure out what was going on, how to help the church. And I don't remember how many months we did that. And then it became clear that God wanted us in Columbus. So,
okay, what year was that?
That was, if we went to Toledo, so 2016.
Okay, so when I met you in Indonesia, you were already in Columbus at that time.
You're right, because if it was 2018 or so, you're right, I was in Columbus, not Toledo. We started making trips to Indonesia while we were in Toledo, and then we continued to go to Indonesia all the way up until COVID. We haven't been back since COVID hit, but we used to go.
So you moved to Columbus. Were you paid the ministry? Were you working bivocationally?
No, in both situations, we were paid by the church. I mean, church is just struggling, financially and trying to make through, and we survive, and God always provided. And so
it's really like a full circle moment. You were converted in the church in Columbus, and then you went back to lead it a couple decades later. It's pretty amazing.
Now, we'll say we weren't necessarily wanting to go back to Ohio at all. So our dream was kind of explore the world, let God send us anywhere we can go. While we were in Toledo, both of our girls had finished college. Courtney had got married. Our nieces and nephews that we were fostering for 10 years went back to their parents. And so we ended up overnight become empty nesters. And so it kind of freed us up, which made us think that's why there's a better chance we might go overseas. And so, but Columbus was going through some very extreme, one of the most difficult experiences I've ever had or seen a church go through. And it was definitely not a situation you want to sign up for. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, let me go.
Right.
But it broke our hearts, right, to get with Columbus Church and hear the disciples who were just from the experience and the things that they were going through. And I really felt like God provided a lot of clarity for us to go to Columbus because I don't know if I could have went back to Columbus without having a vision on what God wanted us to do. And because it would have been hard. It would have been very hard. And there's a whole nother story how God kind of worked that out and put us in Columbus that made it extremely obvious. We were 100% confident that God put us in Columbus and very clear on the mission he gave us to do while we were there. And that was very helpful. It was hard, extremely difficult. And so the goal was that the Lamberts were like, at least go for 2 years, get the church healthy again. And then we'll see, what the future will be kind of thing. And so we get there, and after the first year, it's like, this is going to take a lot longer than 2 years. And so it took us 4 years. So after 4 years, we started thinking, okay, we got the church back because the church was, 120, I think, when we arrived. 60 people left over a period of time. And so we never officially went down to 60 people, but over a period of time, the numbers were kind of up. And then we grew the church back to 130. And then we brought the Snells in to lead the campus ministry for us, and they were doing a phenomenal job. That was most of our growth, honestly, is campus ministry. And it's still doing, the campus ministry is doing, in my opinion, still very well today. So they did a phenomenal job while they were there. And so, again, we felt like God put us there for a specific purpose, and we accomplished what God wanted us to do. So it was like, okay, God, what's next? And so we thought it was maybe time for us to move on. And then COVID hit. And so I thought it's not a good time. It's just not a good time to leave with COVID. Right. So we stayed for 2 years. And then we raised up a couple to take our spot. The ministries were doing well. So again, another one of those times was like, okay, even COVID was very difficult. Don't get me wrong. It was extremely difficult to work through, but overall felt like the church was doing pretty good. And then we decided, we're going to step down. So we resigned, not knowing where we're going to go. And then we actually had a couple move to North River. So I called Tom Brown up and I mentioned Tom Brown. I said, we have this couple that's moving there. They're phenomenal. They probably need a little bit of a break before you put them into the ministry or start using them in a way. But trust me, they're a couple that it's going to be hard to hold them back. They're phenomenal. And then I told him, yeah, we resigning from Columbus. And, if you know Tom Brown, he's like, he has 15 ideas, right? He's got all these, but you should. And so he said, have you considered Savannah, Georgia? I don't know nothing about Savannah, Georgia. And we're not making any decision until we complete what we're doing. And so through that was our connection to Savannah, Georgia. So over the next several months, it started becoming clear that Savannah was going to be the place. And so then we resigned in Columbus, finalized Savannah, and then moved down a few months later. Now we've been here 3 years.
Wow. Okay, Bob, you've got an amazing story. This has kind of blown my mind a little bit. I'm so thankful God brought us together. So we're going to pick it up here in just a second. Okay, so you decided to go to Savannah.
Yep. That's where we're at now, Savannah, Georgia.
Okay. And what year did you move there?
So we've been here 3 years. So we showed up in 2022.
Okay. And can you tell me about it? Like, what was the church like when you arrived? Give me the history. Like, what were you walking into?
Yeah, we really didn't know anything about Savannah. We got to know Savannah after we arrived. And so, it was a small church. I think we were having in the 20s maybe show up for Sundays. And so it makes it easy to get with everybody in the church, or, to attempt to get with everybody in the church. And so we just got the history. The church has been around for 22 years, I think, 22, 23 years. They've had a number of leaders come through. I don't think they've had staff here for 3 or 4 years, maybe longer. No. Yeah, 3 or 4 years before we arrived. And it sounded like it was kind of hit and miss. God had put some people in here specific times for just a limited amount of time. And so the church it's very different than any of the churches we've been a part of as well. And so they really just lacked direction the most, which is really most churches really need. And so I'd say the first year, maybe still today, there's still some members that don't think we're going to stay. They're like, no one stays here. No one comes here. The leaders come and go. We haven't had a leader in years. There's a couple here, the Thomases, that tried to help lead the church themselves for 3 years before we arrived. And they're a phenomenal couple. Like they're great hearted disciples who've been very faithful for a number of years, and they're still here today and love them to death and become our best friends. So it's been a bit of a ride for the church here. Now, I will say we have about 60, close to 60 members now, and we have about 100 people on Sundays. Maybe 10 of them have been around for longer than 7 years, maybe 9 years. And maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 have been around since close to the planting. So only 4 people have been here for 20 plus years. So there's not a
Okay, so
lot of
wait, let me stop you right there. So you walked in and there's like 20 people total gathering on Sunday when you
yeah,
walked in 3 years ago. And you just said that you have 60 members now and 100 people meeting on Sundays?
up to 100. Not every Sunday is 100, but yes, that's been more consistent with seeing 100 up to 100 people show up. But yeah, we're close to
That's
60.
amazing. That's so in 3 years. So you've tripled it in 3 years.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there was
And
more
your
than 20
your
some
your
on the membership
attendance
when we
has
arrived.
gone up 5 times. That's kind of amazing. Okay, that must blow people's minds who've been there for a long time, like, they can't believe what they're saying.
Yeah, the church is very encouraged. And, I don't know if you experienced, but as a minister, I'm like, hey man, I have to focus on the things God's doing, because there's part of me is like, man, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, and I got all these ideas, which could be very overwhelming for the church. But at the same time, I was like, hey man, God has really transformed this church just in the 3 years we've been here.
Okay, I got a million questions for you. Number 1, okay, how do you support yourself when there's, like, 20 people meeting on Sunday? Like, what was the financial plan walking in there? Like, how did you even
Yeah.
swing that?
So my wife and I spent a lot of time in prayer and fasting with where we're going to go. And we debated on, do we want to go to a big church or do we want to go to a small church? And we really felt like we've had a heart for small churches. And so the debate was, can we go to a big church and utilize the big church to focus on these small churches that's not getting the help they need? Or can we make more of an instant impact by just going to a small church? So that's one thing that drawed us to Savannah. Knowing that, we also knew money would be an issue. And so we had to kind of prepare ourselves that if the church can't afford to pay us, will we still come? And so we actually told the church before we arrived that we're coming, whether they can afford us or not. We're coming to Savannah. So, and they did. They paid us for the first year. They had some money saved up. And so we got paid for the first year. And then really the second year too, we got paid for most of it. But the money starts, even though the attendance grows, doesn't always mean the money's going to grow.
Right.
And so we had to make some sacrifices. And then we ended up hiring somebody last year, Tom. And then we had to make greater sacrifices because we knew the church had been growing, but it's been primarily older people, 40 plus years, getting baptized and older people moving in. So we were losing the younger generation. So we knew we had to make some decisions to bring in somebody younger to help focus on the younger ministry. But again, my wife and I knew that means we would have to probably sacrifice, on our end. So I'm pretty much part-time. And so I'm getting paid part-time. I'm not part-time, I mean, and my wife, she's is not getting paid at all now. And so this was the short-term plan with the hopes that she's going to come back being paid next year in 2026. She probably will come back at part-time to do that because it's going to grow. And things are growing. We're already seeing a difference right now. But we had prepared for this in a sense. We knew that these are sacrifices we may have to make when we get there. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but it wasn't a shock. Again, being in a small church, we knew we were going from month to month on whether or not we was going to get paid in small churches before.
Right. So, okay, how old are you guys? Like, how old are you guys as a couple?
So we've been together almost 40 years now, 37 years.
40 years. Okay.
Married 30
And
years.
married
I'm
30.
57, and she's 50. You're 2 years older than me.
Hey, you're not supposed to bring that up. That's right. Wow. Okay, so you're 59. Okay, how can you what are you working a part-time job? How are you making ends meet
Yes. So
and getting by?
yeah, I got a part-time job at Costco doing the inventory for them and stocking in the morning. So I go in at 5 a.m. and I'm out at 10 a.m. And it's as I'm getting older, we're starting to have some health issues. And so benefits are important. And the church was paying, I think we had like almost $1,500 a month in benefits just for health benefits for my wife and I. And so we actually gave up our health benefits to help bring Tom on. So that was $1,400. The church said, okay, we already have this money planned for you. If we, so we did. And surprisingly, when I got a part-time job at Costco, part-timers get full benefits. And so I have the best benefit package I've ever had, even since I worked for myself years ago. And so we're getting that benefit of being part-time at Costco and what used to cost almost $1,500 a month now costs me like $120 a month for far better benefits. Again, that's a short-term plan because as we see the church growing, we're trying to plant Hilton Head right now. So we do church services out in Hilton Head, South Carolina. and our goal was to have Hilton Head planted by next year. So we know that's already been doing amazing. Like we're having like 50 people show up to that out in Hilton Head. And so we're trying to figure out what our role is going to be later on as we're trying to how to figure out these smaller cities and towns. So we do see that changing over the next year.
Okay, so you gonna turn the church over to Tom and your daughter and then move to Hilton Head and lead that ministry?
Possibly. We haven't talked specifics about that. That is one plan, one thing I've been praying about. Like, will Hilton Head be our next spot? It does fit us better because it is a retirement area. You know what I mean? It fits us better as being an older couple. And it's also only an hour from Savannah. So we can still, even if it's just a house church setting, but it's done so well. The church services we've had out there have done so well. It's almost would be neglectful for us to not plan something.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's been
I
amazing.
really, really tempted to launch into a whole discussion about that planting. I love your mindset about planting more small churches, but I want to stay focused on what you've done the past 3 years to make the church grow. What's made the difference? What's helped? What was your mindset coming in? What was your game plan? I mean, what did you do practically that's helped the church to, triple its membership and the attendance is 5 times what you started with?
Well, honestly, we came in with very similar mindset of what we've done before, as far as just investing in the church, building relationships, living out discipleship, establishing family groups. And it was very difficult, honestly. My original plan, the things we've done in the past, wasn't as effective. So it's really caused me to really examine my leadership and what I need to do to help the church be effective. But on a selfish side of it, one thing we liked about coming to a small church is we felt like we've focused so much on building the church the last 10 years. We haven't really built a personal ministry. We've helped some people become Christians personally, but we felt like we just really would love to build a ministry in our neighborhood. We really want to be focused. We felt like we could do that in a small church as well. And so I think just the fact coming out of COVID and having somebody here and the excitement was initially enough for people to start coming out, and then just working closely with the couples and the people here who help give vision on their neighborhoods, their ministries has been pretty effective. And so then bringing Tom on last year was very helpful too for the younger ministry, because like I said, the baptisms we had and the people we moved in were primarily older people. And so that was, it's all been great, and it's all worked, but it's kind of happened naturally. There isn't one specific thing that I felt like we did that helped bring the church. I think it was just the willingness to come in and help. I'll give you an example. When we were in Toledo, Ohio, I started going to the University of Toledo to share my faith. And one day a week I'd go to Bowling Green. And then somebody in Bowling Green started studying the Bible. So we actually baptized somebody at Bowling Green. So I thought, well, I need to be focusing more on Bowling Green and less on UT, because that's where they're open. So I went to Bowling Green and started spending 4 days a week there and 1 day at UT. And then somebody at UT started studying the Bible and they got baptized. And I thought, well, and it seemed like it didn't matter where I focused. The growth came from somewhere. And so my plan, so I've learned if we can just be active in the mission of God, just going out, that God will bless it.
Okay. Now, Bob, I know that it's hard. I think I'm sensing here, like, this is the tricky part about interviewing ministers. They're like, oh, I don't know, God just worked powerfully. And we know that God works powerfully, but it's hard for the person himself to realize what they're actually doing that's making the difference, because they're so used to it. They're used to their own skill set. But help me out here. Like, what could a person imitate from what you've been doing there to revive their local church? Maybe a church that's been stuck or kind of just like forgotten, it's kind of neglected, or out in the boondocks. What did you do? Did you meet with people? Did you just preach powerful lessons? Did you have a great kids program? And what did you concentrate on, especially, let's just say, the first 90?
The first 90 days was more just get to know the church. And of course, there's a lot of low hanging fruit around the church at that time. So get to know the church was the main focus. I will say that we've had here's kind of been our mindset, and in a sense philosophy as well, of ministry. Is ministers, I've worked with a number of other churches when we actually helped work with multiple churches while we were in other churches. And so what I've learned, and being a big part of the ACR, what I've learned is ministers can get consumed with the ministry and neglect the mission. And so I try to focus on the ministry, but never neglecting the mission. And so to me, the mission drives the ministry, not the ministry drives the mission. Did I say that right?
Mhm.
That, Jesus calls us to go make disciples. The mission is what unifies us as a church. The mission is what brings us together. The mission is why we will do small family groups. The mission is why we develop relationships. And I've worked with a lot of ministers, and I've done this myself, even though I preach this all the time, is don't neglect the mission for the ministry. And one of the hardest things going into churches and working with the churches is a lot of the members and even leaders are doing a lot of phenomenal things in the church, but it's not growing because they're doing a lot of phenomenal things, but they're not really doing the mission.
Okay, so let's drill down just a little bit. Can you give an example of what that would look like? Because those words, to a disciple, they seem so similar. Ministry, mission, they start with, and they sound the same, but they're very different. And I think this is a really important point. So, how can you tell if you're more focused on the ministry rather than the mission? How would you know, like, oh, that's happening here in our church?
So usually when I come into a church like Savannah, I teach on my role. I teach on what the role of an evangelist is, because surprisingly, a lot of people think my role is to coordinate a Kingdom Kids teacher. Like, who's going to lead my role is to make sure the usher team's put together. My role is to make sure the moving team, whoever's going to show up, somebody's moving in or moving out. My role is to do weddings. My role is to do funeral. My role is to do these kind of things. And I said, I do those things because I'm a disciple. And so teaching my role specifically, God as an evangelist calls me to fulfill specific things as an evangelist, 4 or 5 specific things. So everything we do has got to be outward focused. So everything is outward focus. And so we work together as a ministry in a family group or whatever setting it is with an outward focus of making an impact on our community, on our neighborhood. And so everything we talk about, everything we planned is with an outward focus of bringing our family and bringing our community and bringing people in. So that's the primary focus, and the ministry is putting those things together.
Okay. So Bob, how do you deal with naysayers? How do you deal with those, oh Bob, you're so old school. You're just stuck in the past. Oh, that's so 1992 and that's ministry from 30 years ago. How do you address those kind of comments, that kind of mindset?
Well, I think of the greatest command, right? Love God with all your heart. We fulfill that by loving our neighbor. We fulfill loving our neighbor by loving God, and we love God by loving our neighbor. What I'm asking isn't, it's not as if it's unbiblical. It's a biblical teaching of what we're called to do. I think Matthew 28 isn't just a mission for us to go save the world or make disciples. I think it's the prime focus that unifies the church for a singular goal of seeking and saving the lost. And so I don't really run across too many naysayers that think that's old school. It's more of a faith issue that people have a hard time seeing that we can do that again, that we actually can make an impact. And that's why, unfortunately, our faith is the evidence of things unseen, but I'll see it when I believe it is more of our mentality when it comes to these things. And what I've learned is if we can develop or create family while we're growing the mission, growing the church, everybody falls in love with that. And one thing I've learned over particularly the last 6 years, 7 years, is we've got more focus on the issues in the church than we have on the mission to grow the church. And that's where we get consumed with ministry, where I could be so consumed with trying to make sure everybody in the church is doing okay, the marriages are fine, and working with the teens and doing all these kind of things. And I've done that. I strongly preach this message, right? And I've talked to a lot of leaders about this, but I still find myself being consumed with, like right now, we don't have a worship leader in Savannah. Right now, we're just establishing, after 3 years, we're establishing a Kingdom Kids program. We don't have people who know how to use the mics in our church. So media is challenging. And so, because that hasn't been my focus. The focus hasn't been on that. And I've learned, our worship leader moved a year and a half ago. And so I sat down with the leaders and I said, we have somebody that we can plug in, or we can spend time praying and fasting and see if God's even pleased with our worship. I mean, we got to look at this situation as we don't just plug in another worship leader. Are we really, this is for God. Are we pleasing God during this time? And the church loved that idea. They're like, okay, that makes total sense because we don't want a song leader. We want a worship leader. And we don't want to just plug somebody in to do something because we have a gap. And I've done that a lot where I put great hearted disciples in leading something, a ministry, but it really wasn't their gift or talent to do that.
So what do you do when you don't have a song leader, you don't have a worship team? Are you playing backing tracks or are you just praying? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So what we learned during COVID, if somebody asked me in 2019, can we use videos for our worship? I'd have been like, no, why would we do that? We got 4 different people that we can just plug in and lead songs for us. But since 2020, I've learned that we have a lot of amazing worship leaders who have made videos for us out there in other churches. Yeah, we swipe songs from a lot of different churches, and that's been extremely helpful. But we'd rather have a worship leader than a song leader. So that's been the conversation of what we're looking for and why we don't have a song leader right now. But yeah, it's been
Okay.
and people.
Like how do you differentiate worship leader versus song leader?
Well, you see, think about the contemporary Christian music today, where most of it's about me and how God makes me feel, and I love God and all that. And then worship is more like what David does in the Psalms, how amazing God is. And so, and I talk to our media team now who puts our songs together, because I'm not a song leader or a worship leader, by the way. So I can't give the best advice. But narrowing that, we just had somebody move in who's been a worship leader at another church for a long time. And I'm like, please come in and help us learn, worship and not just plug in songs. And so he's been trying to give us some input. So, because I think we don't want to there's a lot of great videos out there that we can do that other churches have made. Have just been great Christian songs. That's more about my walk with God and what God has done in my life versus God directly about who God is and what he's done. And
Right.
so,
So that's okay. Now, here's what I want to know. Like, you're 57, you know, probably going to work in the ministry another 10 years or something. I mean, till you die, I guess. Have you given any thought to retirement? What's your game plan? Let's break it down to the brass tacks here.
so
What's your
we
what's your
actually,
what's your exit strategy?
yeah. So if I had a retirement plan, I would not have went into the ministry, to be honest with you, because I don't have, I'm part-time at Costco for benefits. So, I've always been pretty much a worker. So retirement is not, it's hard for me to grasp that concept because I feel like I'm one of those kind of people that if I retired, I would just die.
Mhm.
Ministry is our life. It's what my wife and I fell in love with the church because it's the first time we experienced what we felt like was family, and we were willing to pour our lives into the church. And I can speak for both of us. That's what we want to do. Now, to say that is my goal is for me to make less. I don't have a problem making less money for the ministry, but the vision we have in here in Savannah is probably going to make us work more if we accomplish some of our goals.
Right.
So we don't, I don't know what we would do. I don't mean to seem, I mean, I haven't thought about what retirement looked like outside of serving in the ministry. And again, I
Right.
don't
So you
define
just
that based off a paycheck, by the way. You know what I mean?
what's that?
I don't define that just because I'm getting paid by the church as
Right.
ministry. Before we went into ministry, one of my goals was I prayed a lot about God, don't put me in a ministry and I become a different person. I don't want to be a different person in ministry. I want to be who I am as a disciple. But if ministry would have changed me, I felt like I would have became something else. I just wanted to be like most of us, right? We just want to serve God the best.
Exactly. Well, I totally agree with you, and I think it was a great exercise for me to go plant a church in my hometown, and I resigned from my position in Boise, Idaho, and moved to Ashland, Oregon, and started selling real estate and working a job, and then just leaving the church, on my off time, and it was a great spiritual practice to just show myself I don't do this for money. This is my life. This is what whether I get paid by the church or if I self-support, it's a passion. I really commend you for that, Bob. Okay. So let's go ahead and wrap this up by asking you this question. What advice would you give to a person who wants to make their life count?
It's a great question. It's a hard question too, I think, because life kind of evolves and changes, and the things that I felt different before may have changed now. But I will say, my wife and I are just in awe of what God has done in our lives and what He's done with our kids and grandkids. I try not to talk about too much because it makes me emotional to think the transformation that God has done to give me a phenomenal marriage out of the mess that we had. And I've thought about this, not directly for this question, but the Bible, Jesus is very clear in John chapter 8, right? It's, you hold in my teachings, you know the truth will set you free. Live out God's truth, not my own. If I'm not living out God's truth, and my truth is somebody else's truth, if that makes sense. And I do that because I'm called by Jesus to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added. And so in everything we try to do, we ask ourselves, is this decision going to help us seek the kingdom of God? Because the promise that come with those things in John chapter 8, as well as seek first the kingdom, right? And Matthew, there's promises that come along with those things. And so if we seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, all these things will be added to. And so I think that's a big key for individuals is our lives. We're created to seek first God, his kingdom. Obviously, we're not perfect. We're going to fail. We're going to make mistakes. But overall, that's the goal. And I think God is an amazing God. That's been our mindset from the first time we picked the Bible up. And I think that's where God's fruit has came from. And I think it's the truth, right? Again, John chapter 8, it is a truth of God's, not my truth.
So build on God's truth, on the foundation of God's truth, not on your own personal feelings or thoughts, but just build it on the ground, the rock of God's word.
Yeah.
That's
And then putting that,
amazing.
we learn it's true. I tell people all the time that if you're telling somebody else's story, it's somebody else's truth. The only way we can find out if the Bible is true is you have to put it into practice. You have to live it out. Because if not, then you're telling somebody else's story. And so I think God has a story for each of us. As we seek his truth, we'll know what he says is true and we'll receive those promises. So, yeah.
Bob, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And I've just got to ask, are you going to come to the Small Church Leadership Conference at the end of this month in Lansing, Michigan?
I would love to be there. We actually were hoping to make every effort to be there, and we almost had it figured out. We have a family wedding going on that weekend, and we thought we could make it back in time. And then we found out that we're actually going to be a part of the wedding. And so they need us there a couple of days sooner, so which is going to interfere with that trip. So unfortunately, we won't be able to be there.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. I know I already asked you this question, but I really wanted you to come, and I actually wanted you to speak there and share with the other small church leaders the good news that's coming out of Savannah. It's really inspiring, but I hope that you'll come again in the future.
No,
And
absolutely.
I'm happy that other people can share this story. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. Love you, man.
Love you too. Thank you. And thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First, let your friends know about the podcast. Secondly, read and review one of my books, either How to Plant and Grow a Church or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. And I've got a third book coming out this fall called The 10X Christian, How to Multiply Your Faith, Impact, and Legacy. I'm really hoping to get this out by my birthday here this month. And so I'm working hard on it. Joel Nagel's helping me with it. Finally, you can support the program with a gift today. Just simply go to the show notes and there's a link you can click on. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.